Hey everyone, this is Lizzie Karen. So I'm going to talk to you about a dream I had regarding the longevity plant and how it came into being. So this is a dream of the very early days of Tantal. So I was young, maybe 18 or so, and I had been travelling with my parents and my brother, Uran, to do some experiments with plants. And in this dream, my family is enjoying a location that's high in the mountains, and it kind of feels like a holiday, but at the same time, we're working. So we're doing a lot of stuff, but we're also having fun and having campfires and making interesting food and living in little made shacks that we'd put together ourselves, and it was fun, and singing songs and looking at beautiful scenery. But at the same time, we were doing something really important for Uran. So Uran, my brother, he was already recognized as a genius, and he had already profoundly changed our civilization because of the many advances that he made mainly in technology and medicine, and a lot of other stuff along the way. Tantal already existed. People were living there. I don't think he was the ruler at this time. In fact, I'm pretty sure he wasn't the ruler at this point in time. And things were going really well in Tantal. People were healthier. They lived longer than previously. But old age hadn't been eliminated at this point. It had only been postponed by some of the drugs and medicine and techniques that had been developed, not just by Uran, even though he kicked it off, but also by the teams of people that he put together in the university. And Uran, when he had a bee in his bonnet, when he had something that he was really intent on, it was all in. He was completely devoted to whatever it was at the time that he was working on. And at this particular occasion, he believed he could find a mechanism that could eliminate old age and essentially allow people to live indefinitely as long as no tragedy occurred, like an accident or get attacked or something weird, some weird act of nature. But his obsession, it permeated everything we did as a family. And so, of course, we supported him, we believed in him, we loved him. And so we went with him to do some of this crazy stuff that he wanted to do. And of course, that's how we ended up over quite a long time doing this with him. So his theory was that he had found a plant that he believed he could be used to generate an amino acid that enabled longevity. However, he needed to increase its efficacy in some way. And he believed that by making the plant able to live at higher altitudes, he could get the desired change that he needed to make the plant the source of the cure for old age. So there we were, planting, germinating, replanting, everything that you do to try and get plants to grow strong and healthy. And we were doing this on the side of a mountain. And each year we were working our way upwards, building and planting on higher and higher platforms. And I remember that the plant was a little interesting looking. It had an unusual root structure. I remember how it smells. I remember the texture and the shape of the leaves. If ever I saw that plant again, I would absolutely recognize it. Anyway, Uran only trusted us, his family, to keep the secret of what he was doing. He said it was one of the main things of his discoveries, inventions, etc., that he was not willing to share with anyone. Even if they discovered the plant, they would not be able to extract the amino acids necessary for it. So he really, really wanted to keep this all a secret. And to my knowledge, no one in the family ever disclosed the details of the plant. Not their location, original location, not the extraction process, nothing. Because it was through this reasoning that he had pretty much maintained his leadership status and also managed to, I hate to use the word control the people, but he used it as a mechanism to get them to do what he thought was the best for our society. So, it was his philosophy and gentleness that basically got him the leadership position, because everybody really loved him and what he had done. But it was this that really maintained it over the long distance, that kept him in the position that he was in for the time that he was in it. But I'm actually jumping the gun, because at this point in my dreams, he wasn't yet the leader, or I'm pretty sure he wasn't. Anyway, in the dream, the days were beautifully blue and bright. There was a bit of a chill in the air, so it was actually quite cold. And we were taking 6 plants to the highest point yet. And then we were going to wait to see if they were going to survive. So 2 weeks passed and 1 plant shriveled and died, but the rest were doing quite well. Another week passed and another, and each week Uran became more and more elated. So it was kind of nice to see that. I think he'd got to the point where he thought he was really, really close. So when we weren't working on the planting or analysing what's happening with the plants, we'd be relaxing and talking and just enjoying our time together. And it was at this time that he would tell me a lot of his ideas and his plans. So he was explaining to me in my young mind how he thought this wonderful world that we live on had essentially stumbled from one catastrophe to another, with short periods of tranquility. And it was this tranquility that had enabled us as a people to become strong and for Tantal to be developed. He actually really loved to explain things to me. I don't know where he got some of this information from, whether he worked it out himself, whether it was things that he had been taught by Tehoot, or whether it was from the books that he found when he was travelling. I don't know where it all came from, but he seemed to know so much about everything, really. He said that people had evolved, which is interesting. He explained how the evolution process worked. But he said, as smart as man or humanity was, nothing actually changed for us as a creature for thousands of years, because our lifespan was only sufficient for reproduction and survival. And that was if you were lucky. Most of the humans in the world at that point had no formal written language. And so that meant that any knowledge that they gained could only be transferred from one person to another by memory. So this was quite a limitation. And a person's life being very simple, you're born, you learn how to survive from your parents, you choose a mate, you have children, you raise children, and then you die. And that obviously was the lucky ones. and there were so many dangers everywhere. But at this point in time, mankind was much like the animals, being at one with Mother Earth. Progress was very slow. Hunter-gatherers became farmers. Farmers started trading, and various civilizations sprang up. And civilizations would come and go. Some would not achieve even written language. Others would get to the point of having books, or the equivalent of books. Once written language did start to appear, and that meant that knowledge could be more easily transferred. And that meant each generation was able to build on the knowledge of the previous generation, as the transfer of knowledge became a lot easier and essentially standardized. But progress was slow because lifespans were short. A person had just got to grips with what life was all about when suddenly it was all over. And it was the turn of the next generation then to continue the good work. Super slow, and any natural disaster or any fighting between groups or even within groups or religion might put them back to a previous level. So when I say religion, I mean superstition, because superstition played a part in holding a lot of human groups back, because when anyone came up with a good idea, it was not necessarily accepted for superstitious or religious reasons. Tantal was already a unique human environment before the arrival of Uran, because infighting had been eliminated and my people were already very peaceful. And our success was basically because of the care that we had for each other. We didn't have any superstitions, and we didn't have any belief in super beings. So the people of Tantal, or as it was at the time, Kron, thought the other human groups were pretty much crazy to believe in invisible things. And that a caring nature combined with an ability to stay out of the way of other human groups, who were mainly nomadic and had a tendency towards violence, put us in the perfect position for the development that would happen next. So Tantal, what would become Tantal, was already well ahead of other human groups. One day everything just changed in Kron, because an exceptionally intelligent child was born, and of course that was Uran, my brother. And to this child, the things that adults taught were just so easy and obvious. It was a doddle to him. Everything that he was taught, he just soaked in. And at a very, very young age, he knew more than all the people around him. So it wasn't long before he had actually learned everything that the adults knew, and he was working out other things by himself from scratch. And he realized that all people and animals had a built-in obsolescence, which he had to resolve if humanity were to progress. But he'd improved a lot, and people lived longer. But as far as Uran was concerned, longer was not enough. He wanted everyone to be young or have a youthful body. He hated to think of losing his parents and his last remaining grandparent, who, by the way, were also my parents and my grandmother, that he was very much, he very much cared for his grandmother. So initially he was only able to extend life expectancy, but as he said, it was just buying time for the greater achievements that were to come. He discovered a trigger in the genetic structure of all people and animals that caused aging and eventual death. And once he had the key, he knew what to look for to fix it, and he did. And that essentially was what we were doing as a family up a mountain. And it was a wonderful time, really, it was. But once we achieved his desired efficacy, things really started to change. Obviously, I was still young at this time, but I got to see the effect it had on the individuals of Tandale. But again, I have explained that in some of the other episodes of this, about what happened to some of the elderly people, some who thought that it was a great idea, and others who didn't think it was such a great idea. But to understand the impact of this that it had on the culture, I'll give you a very quick outline. This will help for the understanding of some of the other dreams, some I'm even yet to tell you about. Anyway, he essentially created a fountain of youth. So people no longer had to pass knowledge from one generation to another. They lived long enough to keep learning, and they were able to combine their knowledge. So different fields of knowledge could combine to find something that the combined bits of knowledge could even build on. Uren later became the leader of our people, and science and technology was developed very quickly. And that's why he built, first of all, the great university, and later splitting it into the 12 core learning universities. But at this point in time, people were still having a lot of children. So he was really concerned at the way that the population was growing. It was growing very quickly. And with people living longer, it was a problem. So it got to a point where he decided that this had to stop. It got to a point where this had to stop. People had to stop having just endless children, because he calculated the exponential impact that it would have on where we lived, our culture, our resources, and he knew that there was not an easy solution to this problem, with everyone having children and their children having children, and them still having children while their children are having children, and the children of their children having children. I'm sure you get the picture. So he adjusted his formula to remove their ability to reproduce without his approval and assistance. And then he announced what he'd done. Some people at that point left Tandale, most of which actually returned, but that's another story. But essentially, they had to choose between having unlimited children and having the longevity drug. And even the most vocal protester of the policy of one child per person, which would essentially be 2 children per couple, accepted that it was put in place to prevent overpopulation. So people were living that unlimited length of time, and this is how Uran explained it when he made his announcement that it was irresponsible to have such long lives without, in some way, controlling reproduction. So that's a bit of the background. And so on these holidays, there were so many things that Uran would talk to me about around a campfire. And I remember insects flicking around. I remember sitting on a hard kind of log thing and my bum getting stiff. It's all the little things that I remember in the dreams as well, not just all the things that he told me. It was kind of a magical family time, and it was great growing up in that environment. But that's the essence of that dream. It was really essentially being involved in this process of getting these plants higher and higher up mountains and doing various tests and basically hanging out as a family as if we're camping, having fun and learning all this amazing stuff from my brother. So, yeah, that was the dream. So, thanks everyone, and I'll catch you in the next one.